Welcome back, everyone. Tonight we have Larry Sherman doing a basket illusion plate. So without further ado, here's.
Thanks. And here's a handout.
Oh, great. I'll pass those out.
So if that handout is useful to people, I can send a Word document for the people at home.
If you want to send it to Barry, and then he can.
I'll send it to Barry, and then he can get it in where he wants it. So what we're talking about is a basket illusion. Is there an echo?
There is an echo because of the speakers.
Okay.
If you want to try it without the speakers, just talk loud. How's that working?
That's fine for me.
Can you guys hear him?
We can.
How about,
We're
okay.
going to leave it at that then.
All right.
Can you guys out there in Zoom land hear him?
Absolutely, perfectly.
Okay. All right. So basically, the basket illusion, I'm going to just talk about the steps. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on each one, but essentially what you're doing is creating sort of a canvas to put some other design on. And we do that by making beads and then putting in columns. It's, we call it basket illusion because it's made to look a little bit like a basket. Here, for example, I do have on the back side, it exactly matches what's on the front side. So the idea is for it to look like something that's woven, like it was made with reeds or fabric or whatever you might be doing. This one I just did recently, and I had a little trouble with the back, so I didn't even do anything on the back yet. I sort of did a one-side basket illusion. I'll explain that a little bit later. But it's an open book in terms of what you do as far as design. You can do almost anything. And you can really get ideas by looking, if you go online and you look up African basket weaving or Southwest US basket weaving, there's just all kinds of designs. And I don't try to copy any of them. I just figure that they're a little bit of inspiration. If you are interested in doing this, I strongly suggest that you look at a demo by Harvey Meyer or go to Harvey Meyer's, it's like harveymeyer.com. Go to his website, look at some of his work. He does some pretty spectacular basket illusion work in incredible detail. And so a lot of what I'm doing is basically taking his demo and putting my own spin on it and trying to make it work. So sort of kind of start out by selecting the wood. And in this case, I never buy lumber, except in this case, I do, because it really needs to be dry and stable. So I went to Groff and Groff and I got some hard maple. I think what I got was 6/4, so it measured a little bit more than 1 1/4 inch. 9 inches wide. I kind of wanted something wider than that, but by the time you priced out a whole long board, it started to get pretty prohibitive. So basically, I take a blank, cut it to size, put it on the bandsaw, make it round, and then get started. I probably want, you probably want your wood at least about 1 inch thick to have enough room to have a platter that has some kind of curve to it. But you can make them flat. You can make a true bowl shape. I know Harvey Meyer does some hollow vessels, and he does the inside with the pattern on them. Basically, he does that by making 2 halves of a bowl and putting them together. But it's pretty mystifying when you first see it. Essentially, you mount the blank on the lathe. I mean, I've tried a few different ways of doing this, whether you do the front first or the back first or the top or whatever. I've gone back and forth. His way of doing it, and it seems like the best way, is just basically mount this between centers and then turn a tenon, but the tenon is basically recessed instead of raised, and that way you're not losing too much of the wood, but you have a way of holding it. And then turning it around. So this is basically the top of the piece, or what's going to be the concave surface. And then we're going to mount that and do the bead work on the bottom. We're going to put a tenon with a little shoulder for the curve and do the bead work there. So basically the process is essentially getting the wood, getting the shape, getting a smooth surface, cutting beads basically all the way around, then coming in and indexing lines, and then burning the points where the lines are, and then coming in and filling the design. Now, I go a little bit backwards. A professional like Meyer goes and he makes his design before he does anything, and he decides how many beads he's going to cut and how many sections he's going to have on the indexing. I kind of go and make as many beads as I can, and then I figure how much indexing I feel like doing, and then when I'm done, I look at it and say, okay, what kind of design do I want to put in? Now, I might have a concept before then, but I don't have it mapped out. The piece that's on the lathe and is, and I'll pass these two around. Okay, so just going to go over the beading process. And these are the beading tools. And I put on that sheet, I did put a source for getting all these tools. So is the camera on this?
We're looking at you head on from the camera at the end there.
Over there. Okay. Can you see it? Because I'm not
Yeah,
seeing.
no, we're seeing that the plate is smack in the middle of the screen.
All right, I'm not seeing the image here. So,
Okay, I don't know what that's about.
so basically, I have two beading tools, and if you can see them, it says the battery's low.
Yeah, it's a battery in this thing.
Okay,
I don't have a.
I'll have to let you tell me whether it's showing
Yeah.
up
You
on
might
it.
want to hold the gouges closer to the tail stock,
Okay.
'cause that's where the game.
Can you see them?
Yeah.
All right, so basically I have a 3/16 beading tool and a 1/8 beading tool. Now what I'm doing is mostly using the 1/8 and only using the 3/16 at the very outside edge of the piece. If you can see, how are we doing?
I don't know what that was.
Okay, so there's the flute, and it is pretty much a perfect semicircle with two little points. Now there are, and I get these from D-Way Tools. They have a couple different sizes as well. There are some beading tools. I've seen Sorby and I've seen a few other beading tools. But they tend to have bigger points, and so that basically the cove between the beads comes out bigger. The cove is like really tiny, which has some advantages and disadvantages, but this is the beading tool. So to prepare the piece for the beading, and I'm not going to worry about it too much here because I just want to do the beading, we want to try and make the surface as smooth as possible without sanding, which sounds pretty nice to me because I don't like sanding any more than anybody else does. Although every now and then I do take a piece of sandpaper. Part of the reason is that you get some little, fuzzy stuff that might be raised up from the wood when you do some sanding, and it makes it very harder to get a smooth bead shape. And also some of the grit can conceivably come off, get embedded in the wood, and then when you come in with your beading tool, it cuts something and it's impossible to make a good bead. The bigger issue for cutting the beads is that you need the wood to be stable. If you have any kind of wobbling or any kind of vibration, it's really impossible to cut a good bead. So I cut some good beads and I cut some not so good beads, and I'm getting a little better at it. But let me just smooth the surface. So some of Harvey Meyer's things that he suggested, I think actually have been fairly helpful to me in my turning in general, because to get the smooth surface, and this is not really good enough. It's good enough for a demo, but it's, you know, if I were really making a piece, I would probably put a lot more work into trying to get this perfectly smooth. But he does talk about not so much rubbing the bevel as floating the bevel and just kind of bringing it across and looking for some wispy little shavings. And let me see if I can do that. So that wasn't too bad. I could feel a little bit of vibration in there though. So the surface is not perfect, but it's good enough to cut some beads right now. So in terms of doing these beads, I'm going to start out before I cut any. If I can find my pencil. This is kind of a beginner's tip, but when you're cutting the beads, sometimes it's hard to tell when you've actually finished cutting it. Should you keep going anymore and risk flattening it out, or do you stop too soon? So just going to put a pencil mark across here. Probably the darker, the better. Could use a softer pencil, would make it a little easier. Thank you. Ooh, that's good. Okay, so you can see it's dark. So I'm going to come in. The first cut, I'm going to use the 3/16, the bigger one, just because we might want to use it to make a rounded edge. And we want to do about a 45-degree angle with the tool. And ideally, we really want this to be, that's not 45-degree angle, but we want this to be dead center. And if it's not dead center, we'd rather have it to be a little bit above center. We definitely don't want it below, because then it starts to become scraping, and that's not going to cut a good bead. So this tool rest is a little awkward, so I'm just going to go with it at about here. So I want to try to make sure I'm following that. So now first I'm going to come in maybe a 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch from the end, and I'm going to give it just I'm not going to cut it all the way. That was slipping a little. I'm going to have to come right in. Okay, so you see it okay? Now with the other tool, and this comes unhandled, and some people say you really don't need a handle, and you really don't need a handle, but I just found it was a little awkward for me. I put these small handles on, and I just feel a little more comfortable having something to hold. So as we go through, we're not going to cut the beads right away. We're going to bring it in and score the point where we're going to cut the beads, and it's going to give us a pattern so we know where to go. And then we're going to come back and cut the beads. Okay, I think that'll be enough. So these beads are not cut yet. I have the position. So now I'm going to come in. I'm going to bring the right point in first. Well, I'll get this larger one. Bring the right point in first, and then and then bring it over to the left. So it's basically a matter of swiveling right to left, right to left, right to left, until it gets down. When the pencil mark disappears, then I know I've got the bead cut. Can you see that okay? And there is a little bit of wobble in this because the bead is perfectly fine around some of it, and then there's a little bit of chatter in a couple spots. So I'm probably going to find that with all of the beads. And this is wood that I bought that was already dried, but I cut it into size maybe a month ago. So it's had some time to warp a little bit. So I'm going to go through and cut a few lines of beads here.
What are we going for? A basket illusion.
Somebody have a question? So these beads are coming out okay. So basically, I'm going to do the beads all the way down. This being the bottom, I'm going to leave the tenon on. I'm not going to carry it all the way through. But essentially that's what we want to do. So we're going to come out with eventually something that looks like this, which is just a practice piece I'm using. So we're cutting the beads on this end, and then and there's a few rough spots. So anything you can do to reduce the vibration is worthwhile. So in this case, I didn't bring a paper towel with me, but that's one of the fancy tools we use so that when we turn this around, right, and of course I have to turn this backwards, as we all know, to let it out. But like you said, after a few times, I kind of figured it out after just a few times that that's how it works. Okay, so assuming that we've carried the beads down farther, and then we're going to go to what's the top side, and we want to shape this one concave. Obviously, we want it to perfectly match what's underneath. And, you know, I mean, we always like to get things as thin as we can. We don't want to go too thin on this. You probably want to stop at about a quarter inch and not make it any thinner than that, because for one thing, the thinner we make it, the more vibration we have and the harder it is to make our beads. And then the other thing is, of course, our beads are coming in from both ends. So we've got a limit to how thin we want to make it. So I'll do just a little bit on this. Is that right? Okay. So Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm not going to thin this out as far as we would go, but obviously I want to make this thinner to the point where I want it, and then do the beads on this section down to around here. Then thin out the neck, maybe do this in 3 or 4 sections, then do the next section and thin it out, and then basically go all the way into the middle. Because that'll leave us a little bit of mass of wood to keep the vibration down. The other thing, when we feel the vibration, Meyer suggests, and I've done it, is take a paper towel, fold it several times, hold it back here with a little bit of pressure, and that helps dampen the vibration. The only problem with that is I get to a point where I feel like my fingers are about to erupt in flames. So I don't know if there's a better technique for that. Do you have an idea?
Paper towels or like a Scotch-Brite pad that doesn't have any, like the lowest abrasive.
Like a 5,000 grit
Yeah,
pad,
exactly.
maybe.
The equivalent of something thick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
or even if you have an old sock.
Yeah, I've been reluctant to try it with any kind of fabric like that. I'm just afraid something's gonna catch.
Yeah, if your guys get going into.
With a paper towel, it's gonna just shred. So, but I think you're right. That's probably worth trying. So basically we get to a point where we have our piece. Let me talk about the valleys, burning the valleys. This is probably the piece that I've had the most trouble with, and that is, if you look at,
We're looking down at you.
okay, sorry. All right. If you look at this, you can see that out here, there's a kind of a darker line between the beads, and in here, there isn't. And that's because I didn't do the darkening here, and I did do it here. But I'm having trouble with this whole darkening process. To do it, basically, we need to put something in there that's going to make some kind of friction and burn, but only all the way down at the bottom. So it's got to be very thin. So let me find my, so there probably are other ways to do this, and I'm looking for those other ways. But this is Formica, and actually Ben gave me some big sheets of Formica, which I appreciated. And I have to take the Formica down and thin it to thin it down to 15 1/1000ths of an inch. Okay, it starts out at about, I think 30 to like a regular sheet starts out at like 30 to 35 thousandths of an inch. So it's way too thick. It's just not going to go in those coves. All right, let me think. Yeah, right, backwards. That's it. So the process is bring I'm going to try it. Oof, that doesn't look too good. I'm not going to try it. Basically, what would happen is I would take this thin stuff, and while you got to do this, whatever side you've just cut beads on, that's when you have to do it. Okay. And I've had a couple times where I turned it over and then I realized, no, I didn't do the margins. Basically, while it's turning, you stick this in there and it burns a little bit. But my problem is what I found, I'm trying to do this with either a sander or a grinder, and 21 thousandths of an inch is still too thick. And you get down to 15 and this stuff is just like flaky. So I haven't found a real good solution yet, but it does, when you get into the design, it is worth doing. It does help make for a more attractive design. So the next part is going to be, so let's say we,
Larry,
yes,
can I ask a question? Why do you not use a wood burner with a very sharp chisel on it, like a razor on it, with a razor wood burner instead of the Formica?
so you're saying the lathe is not turning? I'm moving the
It can
wood?
be turning. It can be turning slowly, but because of the heat from the added heat on the wood burning piece, it does the same thing, but not necessarily as with such a brittle.
I tried it with a tip that I had, and it was doing too much burning of the wood
Okay.
farther higher up than I wanted to. Now there might be a tip that you could use. I don't know if I really want to have a burning wood burner in here while this is turning.
For safety reasons, in other words.
Yeah, that would make me pretty nervous.
That's fair enough.
The sides of the burner, you don't just get a sharp line. It kind of scorches the sides until you get like
The sides of the beads.
faded.
Right. I want this dark mark to be as far down as it can possibly be. And I'm not sure I can get that with a wood burner.
Okay, thank you.
Heat the hell out of the beading tool and just stick that in there. Take a
Hey,
blowtorch.
anybody wants to try any of these, feel free. All right. So, all right, so we get to a point where we've got our beads, front and back. Front, I'm trying to get the beads, okay, all the way down to the middle, leaving a little nub in the middle, and then kind of rounding it over. On the back, usually I don't take it down this far, and I've cut it down with this small tenon for a specific purpose. That's not, it's not going to be turned under power on this tenon. This tenon is just to hold it so I can make the indexing marks. And let me talk about the indexing. So the way I look at this, I kind of look at this almost like as a spreadsheet, so that the beads are like the rows and the columns are basically the lines that I've made with the indexing. So each little compartment is a cell. It's just sort of part of the way my brain works. And I can, you know, I think about it, you know, okay, we'll do this cell, we'll do that cell.
You're a
So-
financial planner, aren't you, for a living?
Yeah, well, I was, let's
Yeah,
say.
okay.
Okay. I try to think in systematic terms. So at this point, before I start the indexing and drawing lines, I should probably have some idea at least what my design is going to be, because having more sections or fewer sections can give you more or less flexibility depending on what you're trying to do. For example, can you hand me those two plates that are over there? Now I have a one-way lathe. Thanks. The one-way has a built-in indexing system, which to me is the easiest thing to use. It's got 48 positions. So I can draw lines, any number that 48, 24, anything that can be divided into 48. So I can go 16, I can go 24, I can go 8 or 6 or 12. So I've done a couple things where I did 48, but that's the maximum. Now, another option is this indexing wheel, which I got from Chefware Kits. Now, I was going to try and at least show what it looks like on here, but because of this and the way this is positioned, it won't fit on here. So this has holes in it that the smallest one is 56, the biggest one's 192. So with 192, I can divide that into a lot of different numbers. And as long as I alternate the holes that I'm going into, I'm going to be able to get, you know, if I want to do 64 lines, I can do that. So when this one, for example, I knew I had decided I wanted to do 72 sections. I couldn't do that with my one way because that only goes up to 48. But this one has, the second one out here is 144 holes. So if I'm going to I marked every other hole, and I know half of that's going to be 72. So I could get exactly what I want. I'm going to try to show you how this works, but basically it won't fit on this lathe, but essentially this goes in between the beds. This goes here. I told you I need a lot of horizontal space. There's a little spring-loaded pin here so that this is sitting and the wheel is mounted on the spindle behind the chuck. And now I made a mistake when I was doing this. I noticed that my lines were not coming out exactly spaced the same. I was thinking, what's going on? And I realized I didn't have the chuck cinched down quite tight enough. So I had a couple times where the chuck was moving and the wheel wasn't totally moving with it. Now, once I tightened it down, it was fine. But basically this is turning. I'm doing that by hand. And I've got this spring-loaded pin and it's going in where I want it. And that lets me bring this around. Now, as I'm bringing it around, and then what you do with that, I figure Barry could probably figure out a system that would really work well, because I'm still struggling with it. But basically, this was really made for segmenting. It fits in the tailstock, can come up to here. We've got this sitting in the, actually in the banjo of the tool rest. So it's given us a nice flat surface. And obviously I want it to be right dead center. The difficulty is finding a pencil that's exactly flat enough for this, but I'm working on figuring out a way to get that to happen. So basically I turn this, I take the pencil and I bring it along here. And I had a little contraption where I had another piece of wood that ran around the back so I could do the front and the back at the same time. But that doesn't always work so smoothly. So, excuse me? You could use the tool rest, and I've done that. This is still helpful just in terms of stabilizing things, but it's pretty hard. You know, my tool rest is one of the robust. It's got the rounded edge, and it's just hard to get it so it's precise over and over.
Have you tried a carpenter's pencil, Larry?
Yeah, and that's better than a regular pencil, but it's still, I need a pencil that has zero height to it, you know.
What is the reason you want it so precise? Would it not be okay with a little variation?
Well, there's plenty of variation in here. Yes. You know, I mean, I want it to look like it was made by a human and not by a machine. But there's going to be variation just from me being who I am. So I kind of want the system to be as precise as possible, and I'll make some variations. So basically, so this one I did just for demonstration. This is 36 sections, and the lighter lines here are where I drew the pencil lines, and I want them to get, you know, the important thing really is that they, you know, it's got to come from the outside and go smack into the center. If it's a little bit off, these lines are going to get skewed in a direction I don't want them. So that's giving us our cells, okay? So from there, the next step is I'm going to use the wood burner to accentuate these lines. So if I have successfully gotten the dark line from whatever method I'm using, and I successfully get my wood burning done, each cell is going to be very clearly defined by a dark border, which helps. So I don't know if you can see this tip very well. but I bought this. So on that sheet I handed out, I did put the name of the vendor there where I got the wood burning tip. And this tip was designed to exactly fit the shape of the beading tool that I got from D-Way. So they have worked together on this. And it's a nice little tip. For one thing, it's slightly bent at the end, which makes it a little easier to position the way you want it to instead of having to come straight on. And you can also get it with some extra foam padding because if you do the math, let's say if I have 28 beads and 64 columns going around, I'm talking 1,500 to 2,000 cells in each one, and that's every single one of those needs to be burned front and then back. So I want it to be comfortable. So just, I don't know if this is heated up enough, but basically it's pretty quick for each one. I don't want to give it too much time. Can you see that okay? Basically I'm just burning my way. I'm following the pencil lines, burning my way down. And I'll do that on the whole platter, front and back, so we can get ready to put the design on. And yeah, no matter how precise I have these lines drawn, once I do the wood burning, it's not going to look quite that precise.
Could you score those across with a knife, help you in guiding the burn, so it's sitting in a groove?
You
Question is, could he score them with a knife in order to prepare for the burner?
Right. You could, but I don't feel the need for it. To me, the pencil line is enough of a guide. If I'm paying attention to what I'm doing, which when I have a wood burner in my hand, I should be paying attention to what I'm doing. I don't have much trouble. So
you're having to burn every cell.
Okay.
You had like a Nikron tip, right? And you want to just drag it down.
Oh, just kind of just like this.
Yeah, pre-scored it, you could just drag that.
You
Maybe
could.
make it a little less time consuming.
I suppose you could. The thing is, this is not the most time consuming part of this project. Okay, so that's a great idea, but because the next part is where the time could the coloring is where the time consuming stuff really comes into play. So when I do the coloring, let me just see if I forgot anything. So so at this point, I need, if I haven't figured out what the design's going to be, I certainly have to do it now. Okay. Although this is getting a little late in the process. I have found, to me, the most helpful thing to do is get to this point where I've got all of my cells defined, I've got the lines around, and I've got the pieces burned. And then I just take a picture with my phone of the piece, send it to the printer, print it out. Now I've got a piece of paper and I can, I have an idea what my design is, but I can put it down on paper before I start messing with the wood. And I might do a couple copies and do one just with pencil and black and white to get the basic shapes, and then come in and try various colors. So by the time I'm coloring in and you can see here, here's one where I was doing a swirl. So I just wanted to see, I knew from the math, in this one, I had 24 beads and I had 48 sections. So I knew that if I did this right and I moved up one and over one, that this thing should end exactly halfway across from the point where it began. And no matter how many of these I had, they would do that. So that's what I was looking for. But other cases, I don't have that. So, and then I can try with the colors. Like, here's just to, get an idea what the colors look like together. And I might try them on a piece of scrap wood. but I find that really helpful in terms of figuring out the design. So to make the, and like, for example, on this one, I saw a basket that I liked, and it had some of these floating medallions. So I didn't try to copy it, but it was just that was sort of the effect I was trying to come across. So for the coloring, I use pens. Somebody mentioned Dick Blick. If you're not familiar with Dick Blick, they don't have a store around here, but they're online. So the coloring is basically these artist pens. Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pen Brush, P-I-T-T. I wrote it down on the sheet here. I thought I could get them at Michael's. I went to Michael's and they had just a couple colors. They had black and one or two others. At Dick Blick, they had a lot of different colors. And basically I bought, and these cost maybe, if you're buying multiple ones, they're maybe $2.50 a piece. So they're not expensive, but you know, I bought a few pens. So there's basically 5 different thicknesses. Well, here, I'll use this, the black one here. So this is a brush tip, and essentially I would use this. Let's say I'm coloring in a cell, and I'm going to get most of it, but I don't want to go too far because I'm going to wind up getting the color on the next cell over. And if I don't want that one to be black, I don't want to do that.
Where are you going to do that? Where are you going to be set up to do this? At the lathe or on your drawing board?
No.
Or where?
At a table where I'm not watching TV or anything else, because it's just so easy to use the wrong color in the wrong spot, you know, or get the, so then I'm going to come in, and I don't know if you can see.
You can see that pretty good.
But at the edge of this, there's still some wood, bare wood showing. So now I'm coming in with the superfine and filling it in. So you could color these without bothering with the superfine, and looking from a distance, it would look fine. But when you look close and you haven't filled the cell in entirely, it doesn't look so good. So basically now not every color comes with both the brush and the superfine. So basically I bought every color that had the brush and the superfine. Some of them have just the brush and some just superfine. And it's not hard to do, but it's tedious and time consuming. And you've got to pay attention, because I know the first one of these I did, I accidentally realized, oh, I'm using the wrong color in this spot, and completely threw the design off. And when that happens, or let's say I get a dot. I thought I had a blade in here. Yeah, I do. I'm just using this thing, or maybe an X-Acto knife. This is not a good idea. But let's say I get a little dot on the next cell over that I didn't want. How am I doing? Okay. And basically, if I can do this sideways, I can scrape it off. It messes up the bead a little bit, but if I'm putting another color on, it's going to look okay. Harvey Meyer uses a surgical blade. I figure if I use a surgical blade, I'm not going to have too many fingers left. So I'm not, I'm not doing that. But I think that probably works better, because it's just so sharp and it's surgical steel. It works better if you just take your time. But this, depending on how complex the design is, this is multiple hours involved. So, it might be an hour to shape the bowl and cut the beads. and an hour to do all your indexing, or maybe less than an hour, maybe an hour or two for the wood burning. But when you get to the design and the coloring, that can be long. I mean, I've seen some of Meyer's pieces, and it, you know, obviously he could have spent 80 hours on some of them. I haven't got to that point. One of the things with design is I have deliberately, well, actually, this one's probably better. And this one, when I figured this out, now in this case, I left some with just bare wood. I tried to make it so wherever I had the blue, I put at least 2 blues next to each other. So that's going to make it a little easier for me, because if I've got one blue cell next to another blue cell, I don't have to worry quite as much about, you know, getting outside the lines. But once I go to another color, I've got to be more careful. So it kind of helps in terms of, you know, if the design works, trying to put some of the same color next to it makes it a little simpler. You know, in this one, you could see I've got the orange. I've got a lot of the orange here. Well, it was a little bit tedious coloring those in, but it wasn't real hard, because I could kind of cut over 2 or 3 or 4 cells at a time without worrying about the color. Once I get closer to the other colors, you got to watch out. So that's pretty much the, you know, the process that you go through. I think this you could do anything from a design standpoint. I mean, you could do you know, a Philadelphia Flyers logo, or, you know, Lancaster wood turners, or, you know, just you know, some impressionistic idea. I think it gives you a lot of options, because you've got a couple thousand cells that you can use to, I kind of look at it a little bit like a mosaic, and you can design it as you want. And there's just tons of examples out there of woven pictures. This was sort of like, you know, the way we make mistakes and we learn from them, or maybe we don't learn from them. So this was one where a lot of time, I've had a couple, like this piece here. I use this here because I know the beads on the back are pretty good, but on the front, I've got some real choppy areas, and I just decided there's no point putting all this work into it. I'll just use it for this. This one, I was fairly pleased with the most of the beads, and I was doing something on the back, and I had a bowl gouge on my hand, and I just wasn't paying attention, you know, and the blade hit the bowl. I had all the beads cut, and it came shooting over, hit me in the stomach. Fortunately, it was the handle side, not the blade side. So it winded me. I mean, it really hit hard, and took a pretty good gouge out of here. So I figured, oh, great. But, you know, it was a kind of example of lemons being used to make lemonade, because I figured, well, now I got to turn those beads away, because they've got big gouges out of them. And when I did it, because of the wobble, it came up with this, I don't think you can see it, but there's sort of like a scalloped effect, which I usually don't like, and I do everything I can to turn it away. But it's sort of like, I looked at it and said, I kind of like that, you know, so I'm going to stick with it and do something with it, but I'm not going to try to match this. Yeah, Tom.
When you get the inside done and you're going to do the outside, you've now got
got to jam it.
so you jam it, but not with the tip, because that's going to poke through the wood, right?
Well, it's not that thin. You know, I do have a vacuum chuck, and I've thought about it. I'm just a little reluctant again, because there's these spaces between the beads, and the seal could get broken. But basically, I'd say, yeah, you're going to have to hold it there to do the.
The one that you have that's colored, that was passed around, has a nice recess.
This one?
No, what was the red and black one? Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, so I think I had you know, I might have had a mouse pad against here, or some kind of a jam chuck, and I held it with the tailstock. It gets pretty hard to cut beads in here, though, when there's something there. you know, I managed to do it, but it was pretty difficult. And I'm probably going to be more inclined to leave more unbeaded in the future, because it just it really gets awkward in there. I haven't found another way to do it, you know, because the tenon on this side is going to be gone. And I usually, you know, with the indexing, and, you know, in this case, I drew the lines all the way down. But when I'm actually doing a design on one, I got to stop at a certain point, because these cells get really, really tiny. You know, I got 72 cells and I'm putting them on a smaller and smaller circle. And these, they get so tiny that it's, you know, sort of meaningless.
Like the Jacob's chuck, or that one that someone did had one on Thursday morning.
The question is, could you use a kind of a whole reversing chuck so it allowed you to get at the whole surface, and you can.
Yeah, I would suppose so. And I might be able, you know, I'm going to try the vacuum one of these days, because that's really what it's made for. But I'm going to stand off to the side for sure, because you know, I'm just a little worried about the vacuum not holding.
At least when you're taking the tenon off, you're going in toward the headstock anyway, so.
Right.
But the
So-
vacuum chucks, I mean, vacuum chucks don't work on porous wood at all. So any of those lines are just going to let lose the vacuum, aren't they?
Yes. Well,
So
I haven't tried it. So, but in theory, yes, there's going to be a problem with that. Unless you know, if I really have it perfectly positioned and have enough padding on the vacuum chuck, it might work. Because the wood's not porous. It's only
no,
on the surface that there are these, you know, gaps between the beads.
Chalikian had a Longworth chuck that he'd made, so that would be the ideal situation for that. It's, you know, Longworth chuck where it has the
Grips
nubs and a spiral groove, and you
Right.
twist it.
yeah.
and it grabs the plate and holds it by the perimeter.
So those types of things that I've tried, where you might have things that you screw in and they have a
Yeah.
little rubber. I've just never been able to get them to run true. You know,
It's
I
hard.
mean, you know, they're
It's hard.
sort of good enough for cleaning up a bottom, but
They're not good enough for beating.
not for beading.
No.
No, I just meant for cleaning up the tenon.
Yeah. So that basically, I think I cut it down as much as I can, and then I get in there with a carving knife, and which is I'm sure that's what I did here. You know, I finished it off with a carving knife, but it feels inefficient when I'm doing that. So that's so again, I think if you have an interest in it, I really would try to see Harvey Meyer's demo, because he's got, you know, a lot of experience, and he spends 3 hours. Yeah, Larry.
Larry, have you tried anywhere, instead of a fairly flat plate, you do it more, so you have more of a conical angle? It should add a lot of stability, so you don't get this harmonic motion. You know, like say a 20-degree slope on the side of the bowl.
Right. I haven't, but I've seen pieces that have been done that way. I'm not sure about the beading on a curved surface. Well, if you're talking about a
I'm
straight
not saying
surface,
curved, just saying
Yeah.
conical.
right? You might have to join some pieces of wood to do that. In other words, the wood I have is, you know, it's maybe 5/4 thick. So I guess I could angle it a little bit. So the answer is no.
Just spend
I
more money.
haven't tried that. Buy thicker wood, right? There's that. So any questions from anybody?
Any other questions from anyone in house or anyone online?
Just go to
Alrighty.
gallery view, just look for questions. Any questions out here? All right. Nice demo.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks again, Larry, for the demo, and thank you everyone for attending. Please let us know if you have any demo ideas or would like to volunteer for a demo in the future. You can reach out to any one of us. And if you're interested in helping form the the list of challenges for next year, please reach out. And don't forget, next month's challenge is the miniature challenge, smaller the better. And that's it for this evening. Thank you, everyone.
And I just want to thank Matt and Ben for working cameras tonight. That was a real big help in having a good show.
And if you're interested in coming, learning how to operate the cameras, we'd appreciate the help you can get. Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Good night.
All right.
Good night.